The assignment for this session is to discuss play-by-play and color and the relationship between the two. I hope you guys were primed for that because that's the questions I'm going to ask. We've got Bob Carpenter, formerly of the Washington Nationals. We've got Matt Loughlin of the New Jersey Devils and Jeff Brantley from the Cincinnati Reds with us. So round of applause just thanking them for their time in advance. Awesome. I think we can simply start this by talking about the importance of a relationship between play-by-play and analysts when it comes to a broadcast. How do you see it through your roles, and just how important is it? And we'll start with Bob.
Well, great to be with you all today. Thanks for having us. First thing I'll say, ex-players are crazy.
Stop it.
I was really stoked when I saw that. I never met Matt before, so this is very cool too. But Jeff and I worked together at ESPN, and when I was with the Cardinals, he was kind of not at the end of his career, but he was.
That was the end.
He was still having some really good years, and we got to know each other a little bit then. And I remember back then looking at him and saying, "Hey, man, you're going to be on TV someday." No, I never said that. But anyway, we worked together at ESPN on a number of games, had a great time. And I just retired, for those of you who don't know, after 42 years of Major League Baseball, the last 20 up in D.C. And during those 20 years, I had 5 different analysts on TV. I'm not going to go through the whole roll call and why things happen and all that. But when I was at ESPN from full-time from 88 through 2005, I didn't have stardom written on my resume. I was kind of the utility guy there. I did whatever they asked me to do, whatever they wanted me to do, which I thought was great because I got to do everything from baseball to basketball to football to the World Cup and some reporting and other things in between. But my role at ESPN became, I was kind of the guy they gave the new analysts to. I broke in a lot of guys. I was one of Jeff's first guys, but I can proudly say that I had Oral Hershiser, Rick Sutcliffe, even Tony Gwynn, God rest his soul, other great guys that I got a chance to work with. And I think the reason that happened is because, and Cowboy can either corroborate this or totally disagree with it, when I work with ex-players, I totally respect the fact that they made it to the highest level of their sport, whatever that sport was. For them just to make it to the big leagues, much less be a star player or a great closer like Jeff was, that's really something. And as a play-by-play guy, we all have quirky personalities. We all have different things that have to kind of mesh together. And at ESPN, I might be working with Jeff on a Tuesday night and Oral Hershiser on a Friday night and 2 other guys the following week. That's just the way the network thing goes. But I think they saw that I was willing to maybe, hello, Brian Barnhart, voice of the Illini. I think they saw in me that I was able to work with different people, tee them up, set them up. And I think, Matt, as a play-by-play guy, that's a very important thing to do. And I'm really interested in what you have to say in the continuous sport of hockey, because baseball, and to a certain extent basketball, when that whistle blows, we've got our little breaks, the analysts can jump in, and most of my work over the last 30 to 35 years has been on TV where the analysts can really shine. So, in a nutshell, I think the play-by-play guy's job is to set up your analyst, but it starts with respect for what he or her, and I did women's basketball and pro tennis and some other stuff involving female athletes as well, setting them up, making them look good on the air, because I'll tell you, the better you make them look on the air, the longer you will be employed as a play-by-play announcer. And I got 17 years at ESPN out of that, and I think part of that was working with them. And so, Matt, what about your deal where hockey, man, I would think he's got to get in, he's got to get out.
He does, and Bob, great points that you made. I have total respect for people like Jeff who have played at the highest level. They know things about the sport that I can only have observed over many years in the business, but never really in the battle. And so on the hockey side, and I'll get into the pace of the game in a minute, I'll be entering my 21st year. There was a former player who was my analyst in my first year, which also turned out to be his first year. And that was difficult. We were both kind of finding our way, and it didn't last, not because of personality clashes, but it wound up he wanted to go back home to Minnesota. So the second analyst I worked with was a woman, Sherry Ross, who was a longtime sports writer in the New York area. She, in fact, had a brief experience with the New Jersey Devils when they won their first Stanley Cup. She actually, because of an illness to the then play-by-play guy, she wound up doing a game, first woman to do a National Hockey League game play-by-play, and came to the job with vast experience, but not as a player. And so that relationship, as we developed, and she was groundbreaking in so many ways, was one where we had similar ideas because we were coming at it from a non-player perspective, but we didn't want to step on each other's toes each time. And so we had a great deal of discussion, which continues with my current partner, but a great deal of discussion about what do we think is going to happen, what do we want to talk about in our open, what about the team, where are they now, where are they headed, et cetera. That goes out the window once they drop the puck because each game is its own chapter. But at any rate, a lot of discussion, similarities in the approach because we were not players. And then when she left, not of her own volition, unfortunately, but that happens in this business too, Chico Resch, a former player, won a Stanley Cup with the New York Islanders, played for the New Jersey Devils. After retirement, worked for the New Jersey Devils on the television side. He retired, hated it, came back a year or so later and joined me on the radio side. His appearance had nothing to do with Sherry's departure. It was coincidence. At any rate, he has all of that experience. And so I lean on it heavily because I don't know what it's like to go in the corner and dig out a puck. I know it's important. I know our guys, if you want to win, you got to do it. But I don't know what it's like. I don't know what the daily grind is like, daily pressures, et cetera. So I lean heavily on him from that perspective. And while I'll ask him questions that may doubt something that he said, like, is that really the truth? It's not doubting his experience. It's more to increase the conversation, bring out more from him, and allow our audience to enjoy, hopefully, the broadcast a little better. That being said, you're right. It's in and out. Hockey's a fast game. So the way we do it, generally, when the puck is in the offensive zone for either team, that's my time. So as they're setting up a play, setting up a shot, whatever's happening, he lays out, I call what I see, and then as they exit the zone, let's say the Devils miss a shot, save is made, whatever, and the puck is coming out, he picks it up there and takes it until they get to the blue line again. So whether the Devils recover the puck and bring it into the offensive zone or the opponent. So that's his time. That's his time. The one thing he had to do, and Jeff, I don't know if it's the same with you, and I'm very interested in your perspective. When Chico started, and he started on the TV side, and he started working with Doc Emmerich, not a bad guy to break in with, quite frankly, maybe the best ever at what he did in hockey. But that being said, Chico saw it all. He saw great saves. He saw big hits. He saw incredible performances. He won a Stanley Cup. And in the beginning, it's not so much now on the radio side because he learned, the enthusiasm wasn't as high as it might be. Like, yeah, so the guy put the puck behind his back and skated around a guy and, put the puck top shelf. I've seen that. And yet he had to learn, well, you did, but the audience is sitting on the edge of their seat and they're thrilled by that move. And you have to bring some of that excitement to the game. And he did, and he learned that very well. And now he's incredibly exuberant. That's his personality anyway. So Jeff, I don't know, as you made that transition, what was it like for you saying, yeah, been there, done that, all right, struck out the side in 9 pitches, I did that, they did that, and now you got to make it sound to the fan like this is the first time anyone's ever done that.
I was just trying to figure out how to put on the headset. When I first heard the term layout, I had no idea what they were talking about. I dealt in backdoor sliders and curveballs and changeups and up and in fastballs. That's all I knew. But I did know the game of baseball. And I know that sitting in there a lot of times, for guys that have done what I've done as far as playing baseball, there's a little red light on the back of the camera that pops on every time you go on camera. And I remember at ESPN thinking to myself, does that mean I'm supposed to look at the camera when that light's on, or am I supposed to look at who I'm talking to? To be honest with you, there wasn't a whole lot of coaching. They didn't really tell us, look at the camera, don't look at the camera, talk here, don't talk here. And the terminology was so foreign to me, and a lot of it still is. I'll be honest with you. I've done this for a long time, but I just try to have a conversation, and just like you would if you're talking to one of your buddies, or you're sitting around in the bar and having a few drinks. If you're all talking at the same time, it sounds really crummy. But if you're cordial and you're having a conversation like Bob and I would have at ESPN, if he's talking, I don't talk. I just wait till he finishes making his point. And if there's something on the field, then I don't talk over him. I make that point after the fact. And I think that's real easy to listen to when you're at home, and it's easy to watch. But if you're talking at the same time, it's a little hard. But I will tell you this, I've had a chance now that I've been with the Reds to do both play-by-play and color. And I really didn't really understand what play-by-play was until my partner walked out of the booth and said, "Here's Jeff Brantley." My partner was Marty Brenneman. And before the game started, he said, "Have you been practicing?" I said, "Practicing?" I said, "I've been at the ESPN for 6 years. What if I got to practice?" He goes, "Okay." That's all he said. End of the second inning, I'm supposed to be on the air. He goes, "And here's the Cowboy, Jeff Brantley," and he walks right out of the booth. So I'm just like, I did just what I did when I was 8 and 9 years old, throwing the ball up against the house and announcing the game. I just tell you what I'm seeing. So what I saw was a base hit, and then a walk, and then a ball hit into the right center field gap by a right-handed hitter. Well, for about 3 seconds there, I was talking about, the guys are running around the bases now. Oh, he really got inside of that ball. That pitch was right there. I mean, everything's going out on the field, and I'm just talking about what the analysts would talk about. And I feel my earmuff come off of my ear, and it's Marty. He's right here, and he goes, "Tell him where the ball is. Tell him where the ball is." That was my intro to play-by-play. I think I've gotten a little bit better, but I've never forgotten that. And so when you go from the analyst chair to the play-by-play chair, tell them where the ball is.
Nice. That is experience that not many people have got. Go ahead.
I have one thing to add to what Jeff said. He brought up a great point. At ESPN, we had such an unbelievable volume of product. Baseball games, basketball, football, you name it. They took some of these guys and just threw them on the air and said, "Let's hear him for a month and see how he does." And that's really unfair to ex-athletes to do that to them. And I'm sure some of you have seen this happen. It's very difficult to survive and to prosper under those circumstances. So I was sensitive to that, and I heard that from a lot of guys. I got a guy who won a Cy Young, Oral Hershiser, in Cleveland for his first telecast, putting his arm around me in the hotel the night before the game. And he's like, "Bobby, you got to help me, man. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow." And I'm like, "Trust me, and you be Oral Hershiser. I'll be the play-by-play guy. I will set you up. I will tee you up." But it's a really important thing for if you're in any kind of situation where you can help your analysts. I mean, some of these guys and ladies get thrown on the air with little or no warning and little or no experience, and the one person that can make them prosper is the guy or the woman leading that play-by-play.
Do we have questions? I got a feeling we're going to have a lot, so I want to give us plenty of time for questions for these guys. And I will be the one passing it around here because it's my mic. Thanks, Slim. Appreciate it.
First of all, thank you for the time. My question, you talk about teeing up your color guy to make them better, to look better, so you look better, the broadcast looks better. What are some ways that you get your color guy involved kind of organically? I know you can ask questions or just let the conversation go, but what are some ways that you guys go about that?
Well, I think a conversation, usually on a network game, we would get into town the night before, spend some time in the press box watching the game, maybe 5-6 innings, maybe go out, have a bite to eat, sit around later and maybe have lunch the next day before you even go to the ballpark. To get on the same page, and I know I have asked questions of analysts. And I didn't play. I never played above my freshman year in college, but I have a pretty good knowledge of the game. Baseball's always been the number one thing for me, having grown up in a place like St. Louis, where when I was a kid, I got to go to the ballpark and see Stan Musial, Bob Gibson, Lou Brock, and listen to Jack Buck and Harry Carey. And two totally different announcers, which I'm sure all of you know. Jack, the understated excellence, and the Harry Carey in your face, hey, we're here at the ballpark. But, I had that knowledge of baseball. And I will admit there were times when I asked the analysts questions that I already knew the answer to, but I wanted them to shine. Instead of making my point and saying, what do you think, Jeff? I would say, what is your approach in this situation? You're behind in the count. You got runners at first and second, nobody out. You can't throw the ball down the middle of the plate. What are you trying to accomplish here? And let the analyst it's like throwing that fishing line out there, just taking the analyst, let him take that hook and just run with it. And I think what you do is you build a relationship with them, and they're like, okay, this guy is interested in the things that I know about to talk about for this game. And I really, and it's amazing because I had to do it. That was my role at ESPN. You could cement a relationship with an ex-player in one telecast. And if you got to work 7 or 8 together during the season, what a bonus that was. It was fantastic because then you really got to know each other. Obviously, local baseball, local TV is different because I work with the same guy for 150 to 155 games. But I think when your analyst senses that you're letting him run with it, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, he wants to have an impact, or she, in this case, Chico, he wants to have an impact on the broadcast as well. And he's got something to say, and he's got all that experience. And so for me to shut that off in any way, shape, or form is crazy. We do have a meeting before each game, oftentimes on the flight from, after a home game, going to a road game, we'll talk to. Kind of just setting up, again, what the game's about, what the road trip's about, et cetera, knowing full well, as I said earlier, puck drops and things go out the window because that's the nature of sports. But yeah, we constantly talk. I have great respect for his background and his knowledge. 50 years in the sport and having won a Stanley Cup. But at the same time, not everything that he says is 100% something I'll agree with. So we'll have those conversations. So it goes back and forth. But yeah, you have to try to develop a relationship. I don't know how anyone, and there are some stories in this business where the partner and the play-by-play guy, mostly on the local level, didn't get along. And I'm not sure how that works because that would just be, hell on wheels, quite frankly.
They say it's a long season and a small booth.
Yeah, it is. It is true. Every once in a while, you're like, this is game 62. Can you just move a little bit to your left to give me a little room? But for the most part, I've gotten along with Chico, and that helps. I think it helps a lot.
One more thing. If you're working with an analyst who's an ex-player, do your homework on his career. Because, Jeff had some seasons where, he might have had 2 or 3 blown saves the whole season. Everything fell into place and all that. But relievers will tell you if you have 8 or 9 blown saves in a season, that doesn't necessarily mean you pitched worse in those situations. Certain things happen. So doing your homework on the person you're working with, that's a huge deal too. And I think it makes them feel valued as a novice broadcaster, now an experienced one, sitting in that booth like, hey, this guy cares about what I did when I was a player. And again, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I would say, too, that just like when you're doing an interview after a ball game, you don't want to answer the question for the player that you're asking. And that's the same true when you're asking the question of an analyst. You want to make it short, quick, and just set it up for him.
And if you guys would introduce yourself, tell us who you are and where you're from when you ask a question. You still have one, right?
I'm glad I'm starting it off. Thank you for being here. I'm Shannon Earhart. I'm from Iowa. Well, I live in Iowa. I'm from Chicago. My question is more regarding sideline. In your guys' opinion, what can a sideline reporter do to enhance the broadcast but not be in the way?
Great question. And I will preface that by mentioning one of my pet peeves that play-by-play announcers do when there is a game where there's a sideline reporter. In my opinion, you should never introduce that person as the third member of our broadcast crew is Shannon, whoever. I think that's insulting. Whoever's on that sideline is just as important as who's in the booth. So play-by-play guys, remember that. I hear it a lot, even at the network level. There's nobody who's the third member of the broadcast crew. I think one of the things, and I did a little sideline reporting in soccer. I was the reporter on the 2003 National League Championship Series between the Marlins and the Giants. In Game 5, one of the great moments when Jeff Conine threw out JT Snow at home plate, Pudge Rodriguez caught the ball. 15 seconds after Pudge Rodriguez caught that ball and tagged that runner out, series over, Marlins win, they go to the LCS. I was standing next to Pudge Rodriguez interviewing him, and my producer gave me a great idea as he wrapped up the interview. He got in my ear and he said, "Bob, if the ball is still in his catcher's mitt, nod your head at the camera guy." So I just kind of went, and he said, "Tell Pudge to show us the ball." So when we wrapped up the interview, I'm like, "Pudge, show us the baseball." Pudge goes like this, smiling from ear to ear. It was a great moment. We threw it back to the booth, and the celebration continued. I think the play-by-play person should integrate the sideline reporter into the conversation. And this happened at ESPN too, when numerous times during a baseball game or football, when I did football, we would throw it back to the studio. I would throw it back to Tim Brando, or in baseball, I'd throw it back to Gary Miller or Carl Ravitch. Those guys are in the studio a lot over the years. I would always get on the talkback and say to my producer, "What's the highlight that they're going to do?" He'd tell me, we have a Red Sox homer at Yankee Stadium. I'm like, great. I immediately look at my book. I see the standings, Red Sox a game behind the Yankees, big series, whatever. That gave me something to introduce the sideline reporter with, instead of just saying, "Let's go down to the third member of our crew." Any moron with a microphone or a headset can do that, okay? Be creative in how you relate to your sideline person. And for sideline reporters, I would say, don't say, "Let's go back upstairs," or "Let's go back to the booth." Talk to your producer about this before the game. Tell them, when I finish my report, I'm going to make it very obvious what my final thought is, and then I'm just going to lay out. And so what if there's 2 seconds of dead air before the play-by-play guy picks it back up in the booth? You know what it does? At ESPN, they were really big on this. I remember our coordinating producer, Jed Drake, telling me one year, he said, "Bob, I really like the way that you throw it to the sideline person and you get it back, or you throw it to the studio and you get it back." He said, "It's seamless. It seems like you're all having a conversation. One thing leads right into the other. There's none of these abrupt little interruptions." And it helps the sideline reporter feel more a part of the actual flow of the game. Because sometimes they're sitting down there for a couple of innings, or maybe in your case, Matt, 5-6 minutes in the game where there's really nothing to report on, no injuries, the game's just going on. So whatever you can do to make them feel involved as an equal to what's happening in the booth, I think that's really important to the show.
Prior to my becoming the play-by-play announcer for the Devils, I was the ringside reporter for 14 years, working with Doc Emmerich and Chico Resch. And what I always tried to do, and I did it for the Mets for 10 years too. I happened to be there the night that baseball returned to New York after 9/11, and Piazza hits the home run against the Braves. And very fortunate to be in the dugout interviewing Mike at that moment as the game ended. What an emotional time it was. That being said, I always tried to come up with different ideas. you can supplement what the play-by-play guy says. You can update an injury if it happens during the game and you get access to it. But he can get that from the PR director too, right? Or the media relations director. So-and-so's hurt, won't return tonight. So I always look for different things. I ask questions. Who's in the building? Who's, did my research on background on players. Tried to find out what might be special about returning to Cincinnati for a player on the Mets, or for the Devils, what it was like to go to Chicago, family coming down. I remember Brian Rafalski, who signed as an undrafted free agent out of Finland, playing for the Devils, returning to Michigan. He got sat out in Chicago by the coach, which wound up costing the coach eventually his job. That's another story for another day. But at any rate, but returning to Michigan, he had run this path through college, had to go overseas, and he comes back and he's playing for a championship team. So found his parents, found from him some stories about growing up in Michigan and playing on ponds as a kid. So to add beyond the shot, score, analysis side, I always tried to find something else. Not always successful, but I always tried to bring something else to the table other than an injury update, and it's exciting here.
One of the things that I find most interesting when I'm watching a game, and I watch a lot of games that I'm not doing, and you ask the question of what can you bring to the game as a sideline reporter. As a player, a former player, if you can make me look like I'm a human being and not just somebody that trots around on spikes, I think everybody that's watching that ball game is going to be locked into you as tight as they can get, because that creates a transition from the ball thrower, catcher, or hitter to somebody that you could stand next to. And being able to identify with an athlete, it'll suck them in. It'll be the perfect spot.
One more thing about sideline reporting. Don't make a report sound like you're just regurgitating quotes from the coach, because we know that's where you get a lot of your information. You get a lot of information from players, assistant coaches, whatever. Take those quotes and then weave those into what you may know about the player he's giving you a scouting report on, and provide some other information, because I think fans watching at home can tell when you're looking at your little notebook and you're just reading quotes that you got from the coach. Take what he told you and take it a step further within the context of your knowledge of the game, your knowledge of your team, or both teams if it's a network situation. But don't just stand there and sound like you're regurgitating something that could have been picked up at a pregame presser.
Thanks, guys, for being here. Really appreciate the time. My name's Tyler Reedy, just graduated from the University of Notre Dame. Wanted to ask about the ways that a play-by-play broadcaster can help a newer analyst improve. If you're working with somebody who is newer and has that willingness and openness to feedback, what are some of the things that you look for in terms of preparation in-game to where you can point out ways to get better, ways to improve technically without necessarily stepping on or taking away that individual personality and expression that is so valuable for that analyst to have?
I think that we touched upon some of those things, right? I want our broadcast to sound as good as it can, and I want Chico to succeed. Now, he's been in the business for a while, so that's not as critical to, elevate his performance or give him tips, so to speak. But when something happens, you got to discuss it with them. So I think preparation, emphasize the preparation, find out what he or she wants to talk about, bring to the table, find out what makes them comfortable. After the game, we don't do it as often as we did, but early on we would analyze the game. What did you think happened here? Did you like this? Did I step on your toes? Did I get out in time to give you some time? He wanted to make the broadcast good too. He was making a transition from TV to radio, and so it was a learning curve for him. And he, to this day, is still interested in learning. So I think if you find the right partner, and I don't work with someone new 4 times a week if I'm doing a national broadcast. I work with Chico, well, it'll be 84 times a season coming up as the NHL expands to 84 games. But at any rate, so we've learned a lot over the years, and it's kind of a hand-in-glove thing. But yeah, if you see something that's kind of egregious, you have to, don't come at him and say, what the hell were you doing there? You might say, here's what I saw, tell me what you saw and why it happened. Try to understand from his perspective why something was said or done.
It's really important to communicate with your partner. I think we've gone into an era, I don't know how many years going back this has happened. I started noticing this about 15, 20 years ago. There are analysts, and this isn't a high school football telecast in the state semifinals where it's going to happen and there's nothing you can do about it. But there are telecasts where the analyst is hollering or screaming or celebrating while you're trying to make your call of a game-winning home run or a game-winning hit. That's a situation where, as the play-by-play guy, you have got to, maybe not during the next commercial break, maybe after the game, you say, hey, man, we can't do this. This is like me starting to do play-by-play while you're still analyzing the replay. It's a very difficult conversation that you have to have at times. I've had to have this conversation with, I think, two to three of my 5 analysts I had in the last 20 years with the Nats, and it's not comfortable. And sometimes they say, oh man, I'm so sorry. Sometimes they don't say anything, and then sometimes they keep doing it, and it becomes a problem. And then you hope, you don't want to be a snitch and go to the producer. My feeling is if the producer doesn't hear it and doesn't do something about it, then I've done all I can do, because you can say it once, but 98% of working with analysts, ex-players, is a positive experience, but that's the 1 or 2% that can really make it awkward, and it's something that has to be addressed, and nobody's going to do it unless you do, and you hope at some point the producer says, hey man, dial it back a little bit. Nobody wants to know how excited you are that we won the game until you get your turn to do the replay and the celebration and all that stuff's taking place. And Jeff, I'm interested in your perspective on that, because I've seen it happen, man. When I got a new analyst, that's just like a player signing with a new team who is still a player. When an ex-player comes to a team as an analyst, he is all in. He wants that team to win, and it's your job to keep him from being too much of a homer and being one yourself. Although in baseball, local, our fans know who we want to win. But, there's an area there where you have to be careful, because the telecast can really get out of control.
Yeah, I think for every ex-player, regardless if it's high school, college, or professional sports, the toughest thing for you to become a part of, as far as the broadcast is concerned, is being able to be critical, because that's hard. Because as a player, you hate it. You hate when somebody's telling you did something wrong. So there's a unique way to say this was an error without saying, oh my gosh, that was a terrible play. And the relationship with you and your play-by-play guy has got to be just as good over here as it is when you've got the mic in your hand, because it's really a conversation, and that's what people really want to hear. They want to hear a conversation. They don't want to hear you guys arguing or you talking about how the guy hit the ball and then this guy talks about steaks. You got to have something where everybody's on the same page and going in the same direction. And it's not real easy breaking guys in, because a lot of ex-players are worried about how people are going to take what they say. And that's kind of hard. So you've got to make them feel comfortable. And being in a conversation makes them comfortable.
Thanks, Darren. Appreciate it, guys. I'm Nick Pierce from Liberty Flame Sports Network. I do a lot of baseball, other sports as well. But from the baseball standpoint, I got to work with a former Division I head coach as my analyst, which is tremendous. Trying to get to coach him to sometimes speak louder, and then sometimes, there was a point this season where he's really trying to break down induced vertical break. Now, we're on the radio, so there's still a game going on, right? So and it really got to a point where he's, just going on and on and on. And then the next pitch, and I'm like, slider blown away, 1 ball, 2 strikes. Lay out, he goes right back to it. Is that okay? As long as it's not happening all the time. Jeff, from your standpoint, was there a way that you kind of were able to make your point in fewer words? Did you learn that over time? And going back to something you said earlier, is there something that you wish somebody had told you as an analyst in the beginning? Maybe if you had gotten more coaching.
Yeah, I think you learn that by doing just repetition as far as getting in and getting out. You have to learn how to be able to say the same exact thing 50 different ways in a different term, because nobody wants to hear you say that was a good pitch 35 straight times. Nobody wants to hear that. So you've got to have a little bit different vocabulary, and I think for a long story like you were talking about, something that takes a little more time to describe a certain event. It's okay to say, he's going to pause. You tell him where the ball is, and then let him keep going. But you don't want to have the whole game like that. Just one subject and one quick time.
Yeah, and I think that you've got to talk to them about it if it becomes an issue. I mean, conversation, communication is what it's really all about. One thing that Chico does, and we talked about it, he gets excited. So I mentioned earlier, when the puck comes into the offensive zone, he lays out, except when the Devils are in the offensive zone, I will be describing the play, and he'll be, shoot it, shoot it, shoot it. And they do. And I'll say, and Chico, obviously they heard you from up here because Jack Hughes did shoot it. A save was made, unfortunately. But he'll apologize generally because he knows he's overstepped the boundary. So I would think it would happen there, too, that your analyst would say, okay, I went on too much. Won't happen all the time, but if it was a good story, and why not? I mean, it's a leisurely pace baseball. Hockey's a little different, boom, 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 but yeah, we're just laying back, listening.
But I do still believe, until some producer or a whole group of producers changes this someday, I still believe, even on TV, where the analyst can shine more than he can or she can on radio, there's still defined jobs. There's a play-by-play, there's an analyst. The play-by-play guy wraps up the call, whatever. The analyst shouldn't step on that. But then the play-by-play guy needs to get out, because on TV, here come the replays. And if you're working when I started doing baseball, when I did opening day in 1984, my Cardinals at that time were at Dodger Stadium. I think we had 4 cameras for that game. Now we have 10 or 11 or 12 cameras, even on local TV games. We might have had 1 or 2 tape machines. Now you can have 6 or 7 replays. Everything's digital. And when those replays start rolling, man, that's time for the play-by-play guy to get out, because that's when he shines. And that's the problem that some analysts run into. They'll start too quickly, and then when the replay comes in, guess what they have to do? They have to start over with what they were saying. So if you hear an analyst saying, and again, well, what is that telling the audience? That means I'm about to tell you what I just told you. I see Chuck Cooperstein, nodding his head. There are so many habits and so many little phrases that just get in our heads, and we say them without even thinking. And I still believe there is and I love the conversation point that Jeff made, because baseball lends itself to that on warm summer nights when maybe there's not a whole lot going on. But when those moments happen that influence the outcome of a game, that's when there's a play-by-play and there's an analyst.
Do you find, though, that as the way we take in media, the way we access, I see my children, and they're in their 20s, early 30s, so they're not babes at all, but they've got something on the computer, they've got something on their phone, they're getting alerts, they're watching TV. And so the world that I grew up in, which was very much defined, you're focused, you're listening to the broadcast, watching the broadcast. Now I wonder if their consumption and the way it's being consumed.
Different. It's way different now than what it was.
It is, so I'm not sure. Yes, you're right. If a big moment happens in your game and your analyst, the former D1 coach, is droning on about something, as exciting as it might be, the listener is probably going, what happened? But I don't think it's the same as it was 30 years ago, where that was much more critical. I think we consume media in far different ways, and I think you can get away with that more than you could have 25 years ago.
Great point.
Guys, appreciate you being here again. One of the pieces that I think gets overlooked is the relationship between a play-by-play guy and a color analyst away from the booth? How much, and obviously it's easier whenever you're with the same pairing throughout the season, but how important is that for you guys of being able to have a relationship with your partner away from the booth?
Yeah, it's great. It's important, but you can't force it. It's not the same. I had a couple of guys in Washington that I'd play golf with 2 or 3 times a week. I had another guy there who, when the last out was made, he was out of the booth and looking for the nearest bar. And, it's not all the same. We would have certain moments, but, I worked a number of years with one guy. We spent very, very little time together away from the ballpark or off the air. I was hanging out with our radio guys a whole lot more than I was hanging out with my broadcast partner, but that was just him. And, single guy, wanted to go out and have a good time. And, old boring married guy, I'm waiting for the bus to go back to the hotel. But it is important, and I think whenever you can do lunch, or, hey, let's go to the ballpark early today and hang out and just, see what's going on. Stuff like that happens as well. I don't know. I've only done 2 hockey games in my entire life. They were minor league games in the CHL in Tulsa way back when. I'm not sure of the day-to-day routine for hockey, how early you guys get there and all that. But baseball kind of lends itself to the fact that for a 7:05 game, you can get to the ballpark at 4 o'clock or 4:30, or if you want to, you can go at 2 o'clock and you can get in and, spend some time doing whatever. But I think the relationship is very important, but it's not always something that you can force. And over a period of time, if you're working together almost every day, hopefully it'll evolve and that'll happen as time goes on.
Yeah, there's 2 times you go to the rink in hockey. For those who don't know, in the morning, there's a morning skate. Those are starting to slowly diminish and come out of the game. But so you're there at 10 o'clock, 10:30, leaving at noon, and then you're back for the game around 4 o'clock. So there's a lot of time you spend around the rink. There's a lot of time you spend with your analyst. I'll be honest, as much as I love Chico and we are terrific friends, you do need a break once in a while. I love my wife. She's here, but every once in a while, I got to golf. She's got to do her thing, right? We're not together 24/7. And the same thing with a partner, right? But we have a great relationship, and we go out more on the road than we do at home, quite frankly. There's a lot more downtime.
Yeah, the road is that's really the great time for that.
Hi, guys. What do you think's changed most about how people break into this industry, whether it's play-by-play broadcasting on radio or TV, studio hosting, pre-game, post-game shows during a long MLB or NHL season since you got your start in the field?
More opportunity, that's for sure. When I graduated from Seton Hall University, I'll be honest with you, you can look up how old I am. I'm 68. ESPN was just starting. Bob Lee worked at the local cable company that I wound up joining after he left to go to ESPN. Bob's a dear friend. I've known him many, many years. So that's a while ago. But ESPN was new. Hard to believe. It was new. He actually took a chance going from this very solid local cable system, which was the largest in New Jersey and doing a lot of progressive work, to go to Bristol to do something national with Australian rules football as a big part of their early offering. So it's a vastly different world. You don't necessarily have to hope that someone discovers you. You can have a podcast. It may be hard to get an audience, but you can do your own podcast. There's a lot that is available to you. There are more opportunities, more sports. ESPN's got a bushel full of events that it does. Internet, on the air, so on and so forth. So I think the competition is greater as well, because this didn't happen when I was at Seton Hall. So everyone here, I'm not just talking about the guys who have made it and are continuing their excellent careers, but some of the younger ones who are trying to establish more. There are a lot more of you out there, and that's putting a lot of pressure on everyone, because there are more people who want the job than the jobs exist. But there's more opportunity out there for sure.
It's kind of a difficult question for us old timers to answer. I've got 5 years on him. I'm 73, which is the main reason I retired last year. Because I promised my wife I'd still do it or I would retire while we could still go do things together. And I didn't have the luxury of living where I was working. I've been living in Oklahoma for the last 50 years and working in D.C. for the last 20. I was 53 years old when I got the Nationals job. Nobody's looking for 53 older announcers, so I'm really fortunate that they took that chance. But I remember back to my early days when not exactly the Syracuse of broadcasting, I'm a fighting kangaroo from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Do we have a roo back there?
No.
You've just heard of it. Okay.
He likes kangaroos.
Yeah,
What he does.
okay. But ESPN was 4 to 5 years away. When I came out of school, you did not go to a TV station. There were no jobs at TV stations unless, I think they had mail rooms back then and people who carried coffee around and drinks and all that. Everybody of my generation started in radio. And my first job was a job I didn't want to take, but I took it. It was at the Arkansas State University radio station in Jonesboro called KASU. They had an open, I was a December graduate because I was on the 4.5-year plan. And luckily they were looking for a news person. The job posting said news director, which meant one-man news department in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I was there for about 6 months and then I got a chance to go to Tulsa and do some AAA baseball on the radio as an unpaid second announcer, selling advertising during the day and doing the games for a Coke and a hot dog at night. But I think my thought is for you, and I think I heard Tamar talking about that in the previous session when I was eavesdropping here, because, we didn't have the whole TikTok, social media, none of that. We didn't even have cell phones. And in fact, I remember standing in airports. The death of Kenny Klein at Louisville the other day reminded me of this. One of the great guys that any of us ever worked with, and any of you know Kenny, know what I'm talking about. I remember standing in the Atlanta airport at a payphone talking to Kenny, and he was giving me the Louisville roster for a game I had like 2 days down the road, and I'm jotting it down on a yellow legal pad over the phone. We were so primitive the way we had to prepare for games. It was unbelievable. Then when you finally got your charts done and got to town, that's when you got some more information. But it was so difficult. But I think my point is, do everything you can get your hands on. I didn't want that. I didn't want to do news in Jonesboro, Arkansas, but I did it. I had a couple of reports that aired on National Public Radio because we had our tornado, and then we had a rabid skunk outbreak 2 months later. Big news, man. I was all over it. But then I found myself doing minor league baseball, college stuff, and I did high school games in a little town right outside Tulsa called Sapulpa, Oklahoma, and I did their football games for $25. I was on the field 2 hours before the game with the head coach, writing down the roster on my yellow legal pad. I see some heads going like this. We have people who have done this. Basketball season. The girls were still playing 6-on-6 basketball in the late 70s, and the girls' game was at 6:30, and the boys' game was at 8, and I got $30 for doing both of them. And I thought, man, this is great money on top of my job. Do whatever we all have a story, right? We all have crazy things that we didn't want to do, that we had to do. And then when I got to USA Network later, I didn't want to do boxing, but that was part of my job. I got to go to the Masters. I got to go to the US Open Tennis Championships and do some college football and basketball. I didn't want to do boxing, but I had to do it. And I think we all have those stories, but do everything you can get your hands on, because as one wise network guy once told me, he told me, young man, you never know who's listening or who's watching. Always sound your best, always look your best when you're on the air.
Repetition, tapes, and connection. You'd be surprised at how we go about trying to hire a new broadcaster for a big league club. You would think it would be this huge vetting process, and all. It's not. I heard this guy, he sounds good, let's bring him in. Both of my partners now were minor league announcers in baseball. And it was just one of our owners heard our guy in AA, said, I like him. Let's give him a shot. He came up, he sat in our booth unpaid for 1 full year, just listening to me and Marty. The next year, he was the play-by-play guy for the Cincinnati Reds. Not bad.
Yeah, you got to know when those doors are going to be opened. You have to recognize opportunity. Sitting for a year not getting paid, it's not the easiest thing in the world. I mean, he obviously had another gig that he was doing.
He's making bank now.
There we go. There you go. That's the point. Say yes to everything. Have you ever done speedboat racing? Sure. I had that once. I did a series that was on ESPN. I didn't know,
Love it.
first thing about it, but I got through it.
Great stuff. This is going to be our last question.
Thanks, Darren. Dan Hasty out of Michigan. Thanks again for coming out here, taking the time and doing all this. My question is really for any of the three of you, and I'm curious about how you feel a broadcast maybe needs to or should flip depending on the compelling nature of a specific broadcast. Since I have play-by-play and color analyst perspectives, how do you balance the focus on the game and the imperative nature of retaining an audience based on the compelling nature of said game?
Well, I think it differs from local to national. At ESPN, and I don't know if Jeff ever heard this, but we'd have a yearly seminar for every sport. Everybody would go to Bristol for baseball in February, basketball in September, football in July. Pounded into us was every quarter hour at the network level, the audience has a certain amount of changeover to it. So I first started hearing that in the late 80s, and that's when I noticed that producers were becoming obsessed with storylines. This about a player, this about a coach. This is why you see at the College World Series, this is why you see mom and dad in the stands and the brother and the sister. And, these are stories that we can tell, but they can be told to a certain extent. Some people say, I'm so sick of seeing this guy's mom and dad. Well, in the previous quarter hour, maybe that audience was different, and those people didn't see that. So, on the local level, I think the way, and I kind of feel sorry for, we got a guy, Dan Kolko, now, who was our sideline reporter, who just stepped in for me in D.C. When things got bad, and I had 6 really bad years with the Nats, 06 to 11, from 12 to 19, we were like the second or third winningest team in baseball, right there with the Dodgers and the rest of them. Won the World Series. My last 6 years there, right back down where I started those first 6 years, and it wears on you. But I was of the age where if we were in the 6th inning and we were down 8-1, I had things I could talk about. Because if it was Roberto Clemente Day, I saw him play. I saw Willie Mays play. I saw Stan Musial. I was a National League guy. I never, Mickey Mantle's from 60 miles away from where I live, but I never got to see him play except on TV. But guys of our generation, we always have those historical things we can kind of fall back on and do some storytelling. And I've seen some games this year where the young guys now coming in, they don't have some of that. It's not their fault. But I think you can do as much research on old-time hockey, old-time baseball, whatever you want, to always have something to fill in a telecast or a radio broadcast to keep that audience tuned in. As long as you're not sitting there reading out of, Wikipedia or something. But, I have that firsthand knowledge because I saw these things. And it's huge. And I think it's one way you can control the telecast and still keep people engaged.
I agree with that. There are a lot of baseball games that are 12-0 in the 3rd inning. You got a long way to go. They're different. I think that's where your color guy really shines, because he's got to be able to tell some stories, give some understanding, but I also think that's the perfect time to let the people that are listening to you or that are turning on every day get a little piece of you, because I think that if you can give your listener or your viewer a little bit of your personality, now you can't go overboard, but if you give them a little bit of your personality, then they're going to want to turn you on every single night. And that was some of the greatest advice I got from Marty Brennan when we first started. He goes, let them have a piece of you. He goes, give them your attitude. Let them know how you were as a player. Tell them what you like to eat. Tell them where you've been. Tell them who you played with. And it has been miraculous. I'll just say that.
And if I could just wrap up, and I think Jeff touched upon it, Bob, as well, with stories and what have you. Let's not forget this is fun. This is entertainment. Yes, players like Jeff are under the spotlight and trying to make a play in the heat of the moment, and they live and die on that. They've been successful most of their life, and here it is. Will they be successful in this moment? But in the end, it is fun. So tell some stories. People want the team to win, but they want to like you too. You are coming into their living rooms. You're coming into their automobiles. You're coming into their bedrooms.
They want to laugh sometime.
Yeah, laugh a little bit. And I'll leave it with this. The Mets, I think, have a terrific TV broadcast crew in Gary Cohen and Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez. I'm prejudiced because I know them, but I'm also from New York and I'm a Mets fan. When the game gets bad, they'll break out a pile of baseball cards and just, here you go. You can see that it's 12-0 in the third inning, and they go to the cards, and sometimes it's a star, sometimes it is obscure player, and they'll just talk about that, and it makes you laugh. You don't turn it off because they're going, oh, well, it's 12-0, that pitch was outside. No, it's like, how are you keeping me here? So let's make it fun.
One more thing. With all this information we have available these days, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room every night.
It's well said. Well said. Round of applause for these guys. Appreciate it, guys. Very good stuff. Very good stuff. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Darren.
We'll take 2 before our next session, maybe fewer than that. So just hang tight.